Go.
Thank you.
Hi, Bob. Good to see you.
Hello. How
Hi,
are you?
Bob.
Hello. Okay, we're good to go.
All right. Thank you very much, Travis, for taking care of that for us. It would appear that we're live, and I would like to call this meeting of the Augusta-Richmond County Board of Elections to order. We have, over the past couple of weeks or so, we've been receiving the minutes from our previous meetings, and I would like to have consent from our board members. If you have had an opportunity to review the minutes in sections A through H, and you have no addendums or no corrections, I would like to take these as a lump sum, and I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes that are listed in items A through H as accurate. And if there are amendments, then please let me know now. If not, then I'll accept the motion to accept those minutes as presented for items A through H.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the minutes A through H as listed after since each of us has had an opportunity to review these, and if there had been a question, we could have posed it before now. So I move that we approve these minutes.
I second that.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded that we accept the minutes as presented in items A through H. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That kind of helps us out with our time here, so that we're not trying to waste a lot of time with each one of those items. Because I'd like to make sure that we spend the ample amount of time on item number 3, which is an update on the March 16, 2021 special election. And then, Lynn, as soon as you're done with that, please roll on into item number 4, A, B, and C without objection.
Yes, sir. I'll be glad to. Okay, so regarding the March election, just a couple of reminders on dates. Many of these dates you've seen before, but just a reminder that the testing of the voting equipment started on Tuesday, February the 17th, and we finished it up on Friday, February the 26th. All that process went well. Obviously, the voting equipment is already at all the advanced voting centers and being used, and everything is working just as it should. Interesting there under bullet number 2 on your report that our number of active registered voters right now is at 139,000. That is an all-time high of the world for us. We've never seen numbers that high, and I think what we're doing is continuing to see the impact of the having to opt in to register to vote through the Department of Driver Services. We just continue to have more and more people registering to vote. So at this point, we are up at 139,324. The 3 satellite sites for advanced voting opened up today.
Mm-hmm.
Those being the Brigham Center, the Howard Center, and Diamond Lakes. We have not yet gotten numbers in. They closed at 6 o'clock today, so we don't know what the numbers for advanced voting are through the close of business today. But I can tell you that the last report I checked, which was about an hour ago, we were approaching around 450 or so for the day with all 3 places. So I think that an estimate of 500 for the day is a pretty good estimate. Also, at that same time, I checked the number of mail-in ballots that we've sent out and that have come back in. And about an hour ago, we had sent out 233 ballots through the mail. And of that, 119 had made their way, voted back into us and been verified and into the system. So it's definitely a light turnout, no doubt about it. We know that there'll be no Saturday voting for this election. And just as a little side note, we have finished our poll worker training, and we have around 260 poll workers that are trained and who will be deployed on election day to the various polling places. Any questions on that from anyone?
No.
No.
None.
All right. So the next section we're going to talk about are annual list maintenance processes. So especially in odd numbered years, registrars around the state of Georgia and across the country are running list maintenance programs to make sure that their lists are in order and contain the list of eligible voters. We track using processes run with the United States Postal Service where people have moved to, and we reach out to voters and notify them and try to get information updated and correct. That's our prime objective in these odd numbered years, is to kind of shore things up a bit. And so those processes, while I don't have a date certain for when they'll start, I do know that the planned order of the processes is as stated on your report. So we'll start off with the no contact into general election process. And that process is the only one that we're going to talk about that is actually performed on inactive voters. The other two processes that we'll talk about are performed on active voters only. And you all, the elections board members, are certainly aware of the fact that we do have these two categories of eligible voters. We have our active voters, which are voters that we have heard from that have voted or filed a change of address or signed a petition or applied for a ballot. They've had some contact with us in a 5-year period of time, and that keeps a person on the active list. But absent that contact after 5 years of time, and then for other certain circumstances, a voter can be transferred to the inactive list. But you also know that even though a person is on an inactive list, it has no bearing as to their eligibility. It just means it is a voter with whom we haven't had contact in quite a period of time. So they are inactive as opposed to an active voter who we more frequently hear from. So let's start out with the inactive voters. The process for identifying and notifying inactive voters that we need to hear from them in order for them to stay on the list is identified in Georgia law under Code Section 21-235. And what that code section says is that these voters are notified, and we know here in Richmond County, we have around 13,500 voters who are categorized as inactive. Now, not all of those inactive voters are going to be voters with whom we've had no contact in 2 general elections. Sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, voters are moved to an inactive status because we've sent a piece of mail to them and it's come back to us as undeliverable or for some reason. And when that happens, we send a confirmation notice out. If they don't respond to it, then they're moved into an inactive status. So there will be some people, certainly, of those 13,500 inactive voters who will not be impacted by this process, but there will be thousands who are. So the process goes like this. Between 30 and 60 days before the removal process is systematically run, all voters who are identified that fall in this category of being inactive, and voters with whom we've not had any contact in 2 general election cycles, so basically 4 years, they're sent a notice to their address where they're registered. And the notice says, we haven't heard from you in a while. We need to hear from you to verify that you still want to be on the list of registered voters. And we tell them in that notice, if we don't hear back from them, then they are subject to cancellation off the voters list, and they may need to re-register to vote at some time in the future. So some of the voters that we send notices to will respond back, and many will not respond back. Those voters who don't respond back to the notice are going to be their registration will be automatically canceled. The voters who do respond back, they will automatically be restored back to an active status where they continue on down the line voting and doing whatever they do. It's important to know about these processes. Couple of things. Number one, these are processes that are not discretionary on behalf of the boards of elections. These are mandatory state list maintenance processes that we have to run. Counties will also be paying the postage for the notices that are generated by the Secretary of State. They will all happen at the same time statewide, so it'll be a blanket thing. And the list of the names of the voters who voter registration is canceled as a result of this process is a matter of public record. And so we have had, especially in the last 2 odd numbered years where we've run this process, we've had many groups reach out wanting a list of the names of people whose voter registration was contacted so they could perhaps give more personalized service or call it what you will to encourage people to get back on the list of registered voters. Fact of the matter is, many of the voters that are removed through this process are voters that no longer live in this area or no longer live in the state of Georgia, and they haven't voted in a number of years, but nor have they contacted us to give us permission to remove them from the list. So this is one way that we can help clean up the list with the inactive voters. Now, the other two processes that we're going to talk about are processes that are run on just the active voters. So the active voters, I mentioned a moment ago, we have 139,000 plus active registered voters right now. We know that in excess of 87,000 of those voted just this past November. But what we will do with these two processes, the first one will be to compare the list of registered voters against the address changes filed with the United States Post Office. And any direct matches that we find are going to fall into two categories. The addresses that people have submitted through the post office will either be inside of Richmond County or outside of Richmond County. Those that are within Richmond County, those voters' addresses will be automatically updated to whatever address they've given to the post office. It will just be automatically done. No notification, no signing, nothing required on behalf of the voter. We will update their address. After we update the address, we're going to send them a notice to say your address is being updated to this address. So if you have a problem with that, or if that was just a temporary address or whatever, let us know. So we'll run that process. Now, for voters who have an address change outside of Richmond County, that also falls into two categories. The first one is within the state of Georgia, but outside of Richmond County. And the second one is outside of the state of Georgia. So for voters whose address change has been updated to another county in Georgia, and they reply back and tell us they want to stay on the list of voters, then we're just going to transfer that voter's record to whatever county it is there in Georgia. And so they don't have to go back to re-register. We'll just use that as a registration form to update their record to their new county of residence. For voters who move outside the state of Georgia and respond back and let us know that they're now living outside of the state of Georgia, those voters' registration will be canceled, and we will send them a notice telling them that we're canceling their registration. So that's generally how that whole process works. The next process is a process where we take a look at the active list of voters, and any voters that we have had no contact with in 5 years is sent a notice to say, we've not heard from you in 5 years. Are you still here? Would you like to remain a registered voter? Those voters who reply back to say yes, their status is automatically restored to an active, or it's updated as a contact, which keeps them in an active status and resets their 5-year clock. For those voters who don't reply, though, they are then transferred from an active status to an inactive status, where they will then reside eligible to vote for 2 more general elections. And if we hadn't heard from them, then in what will equate 9 years, because they would have been 5 years in the active status and now 4 years in the inactive status with no contact from them, then they will be subjected to the no activity in 2-year process, the first one that we talked about that affects the inactive voters. So that's basically what we'll have going on this year with list maintenance. But I wanted to go ahead and talk about it because I think the Secretary of State, they have not exactly set their calendar on when these processes will happen, but I believe they're going to happen sometime in the spring. And again, it's my understanding, at least the way things are right now, that they'll happen in this order. We'll do the no contact process on the inactive voters, and then we'll move to maintenance on the active voters with the comparison of the address changes with the post office, followed by the no contact confirmation process with those people that we have not heard from in 5 years.
Okay.
Any questions?
No.
No.
And I was asked earlier to cite these code sections. And so I mentioned the process on the inactive voters. That code section is 21-235. And then the code section pertaining to the United States Post Office comparison on the active voters, that's in 21-233. And then the no contact confirmation that we run on the active voters, that's provided for in code section 21-234. So just stay tuned, and as we should hear more over the next month or so exactly what the process is. The state will generate all the lists and put us on a schedule of when we need to do what, when we need to get our notices out in the mail and all that kind of stuff. So we'll keep you updated as we progress through these processes.
Okay.
Lynn, could you clarify for me which notice goes out from the Secretary of State and which notice goes out from our board?
All of the notices in all three of these processes will be generated through the Secretary of State's office, through the statewide system. They will print those notices, put them in a box, and ship them all down here to us, and we will affix postage to them and mail them out.
Any other questions?
No.
None.
None, Mr. Chairman.
All right, let's continue.
Okie doke. The next thing I want to talk about is the voting machine warranties. So we have all this great new voting equipment. The contract that the state entered into when they purchased the equipment, the warranties on all the equipment expires December the 31st of 2021. And so we need to decide exactly how we're going to proceed with purchasing warranties. If we want to purchase warranties, exactly how we want to proceed. And I wanted to go ahead and plant this seed, maybe for follow-up discussion at our next meeting. But we have looked at it, staff has looked at it. Those of you that, all of y'all have been on the board for a while, and many of you will remember that back in, I want to say around 2007 or 2008, we were at that time purchasing warranties on all of the DRE equipment, the former voting system. And what we found is that the equipment performed very well. It very seldom broke down. And so it was expensive. We were spending probably close to $65,000 or $70,000 a year to purchase warranties that we really weren't using. And so what we moved to at that time was a line item for repairing and replacing voting equipment as it became necessary to do so. So one option for purchasing warranties could be that we purchase warranties on the big items. And by the big items, I mean the big scanners that we use for tabulating the mail-in absentee ballots. Other big items are the election day scanners. I mean, those are the expensive pieces of equipment that cost a good bit of money to repair. And then lastly, I would suggest that we purchase warranties for the two printers that we have that print ballots for us when we need them. Those are the ballots that we print when we need to duplicate and manually remark ballots and whatnot. It would be my suggestion, given that to purchase warranties for the 625 ballot marking devices that we have right now would cost us $78,000 a year, which would bring the whole to purchase warranties on everything would be around $90,000. So it would be, my suggestion that we consider purchasing warranties on the two big scanners that we use to count mail-in ballots, on all the election day scanners, and also on the two big printers that we use. And as for the ballot marking devices, that we set aside a line item in the amount of $35,000, $40,000 in our budget each year to use to repair or replace voting equipment as we need it. We're fortunate with our inventory now. We are required by law in big elections to have voting equipment equal to one voting machine per every 250 people who might come into a polling place to vote. And we well exceed that threshold. So we have a little bit of a surplus of voting machines, not a ton, but we have a little bit. The other thing we need to keep in mind is that the ballot marking devices that we use during advanced voting, which could be upwards of 100 machines, particularly in elections like we had last year, those can be very easily reprogrammed and redeployed to for election day use. It's a really simple thing to do that. So that's kind of where we're headed. I'm still gathering some information on, for instance, the ballot marking devices. It's when we use the term ballot marking device, that is three pieces of equipment actually. It's the touch screen that the voters mark, it's the printer that prints the ballot, and it's the big battery backup that powers it in the event of a power outage. Those three pieces together cost $3,500. If you buy a whole voting machine, it's $3,500. What I'm gathering information now on is, can we purchase those components separately? And I believe we can. And if so, how much? And so, if we have a situation where the touchscreen has gone bad, but there's nothing wrong with the printer, then we don't need another printer. We just need a touchscreen to make that unit whole. And likewise with the printers. So I'll keep you posted. We are, we're working on the bones of our budget right now. So I'll ask you just to keep all this in mind, and we'll continue the conversation next month. We'll be submitting our budget somewhere in the June to July timeframe. So we have a few minutes or a little while to discuss it. So I just wanted to bring it up for information, really.
So Lynn, if you would, at the next meeting, if you're completed with your research, would come to the board with a staff recommendation for us to take up as a motion and then vote up or down.
I will. And there's one other thing I'll mention about this too. Obviously, our biggest need for voting equipment is going to be in a presidential election. That's when we have the big turnout, is in a presidential election. And while I certainly think that the 2022 election cycle could rival a presidential election year, I think it will be an election of tremendous interest and high voter turnout. Still, it won't rise to the level of what we'll see in 2024. So, another thing, and I'll put this in the recommendation too, as far as our long range planning goes, I think we should plan to put in a capital request following the 2022 election for any bulk of equipment that we feel like we need to replace leading into the 2024 election year.
And what about storage?
Well, storage is a good question. Right now we have the annex building space, the Board of Education space, where all the voting equipment is stored, and the space we have for that is adequate. But we also still have our warehouse where part of our things are stored over there. So those two facilities together, it's probably 16,000 square feet of storage that we're using for this voting system. We are on the list for funding for a new facility, or either renovations to an existing facility if the upcoming SPLOST passes, but we'll see what happens with that. But it's possible, knowing that the space that we're leasing from the Board of Education right now is a temporary solution for us. We may find ourselves entering into a long-term lease agreement to have the space that we need to be able to store and move that equipment around.
Any additional questions on the 2022 budget?
No.
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 Okay. That was the warranty information. There are a couple of other things about the 2022 budget I'd like to mention. We know that in 2022, we have two scheduled elections. One is on May the 24th. The other one's on the other one's on November the 8th. I think all things considered, between the governor's race and the U.S. Senate race and the mayor of Augusta race and commission races and whatnot, I think that runoff, at least in July, is a foregone conclusion. I think it's going to happen somewhere. And so my plans now are to go ahead and build that in as a date certain in the election. I will also go ahead and build in the contingency budget enough money to fund a runoff that may or may not occur from the November election. and we'll have that money set aside for us should we need it.
Okay.
Also, moving into the next year and after last year in 2019 and 2018, it seems evident to us that we could definitely benefit from a couple more positions in our office. So I'd like to talk about those for just a minute and just get everyone thinking about that. We would like to see the creation of a position of an election technician, if you will. We're working on the job description now, so I don't have an official name for it, but basically this person would be responsible for asset management of the voting equipment, would be responsible for testing the voting equipment, deploying the voting equipment, managing all that voting equipment. Also, we would want that job description written heavy on the IT side. So this person would basically step in as our technician, much like we had the Dominion technician before. This person would assume some of that role as well. In addition to that, given the nature of elections since 2018 and the volume of open records requests and whatnot that are relentless these days, we think, Travis and I both think, that we could benefit from an office manager, administrative assistant type person to help with procurement, which seems to be never ending as well, to help alleviate some of that from the other staff. We think it warrants it at this point. So we're working on a job description for both of those, and we'll come back with the discussion on the warranties. We'll talk more about that. We're making good progress on the job description. Fortunate for us, there are many other counties in the state that we're all thinking along the same lines with these type positions. So we're able to share job descriptions and information and whatnot. So many of our colleagues are on a fiscal year budget, which means that they have already done a lot of this work and submitted their budget. So we're able to glean from their experience and get some information. So we'll be back in touch about that.
Lynn, are you envisioning this person being in your reporting to work in your office or reporting to work in the IT department?
The second position, the election technician person, no, they would report to us. In fact, they would most likely be working most of the time from our annex or wherever the equipment is stored. That would be their primary base.
Okay.
Now, the second person, the administrative assistant, would be here because it would be an office manager type person.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank
Any
you.
additional questions?
I do have a question, Mr. Chair. You said something about the Dominion IT guy. Is it my understanding that once the warranty on the machines end, that we will no longer have the availability of the Dominion IT guy?
Actually, their contract expired with the state of Georgia following the January 5th election. So
Okay.
our technician is still with us, but he's transitioned over to Augusta Staffing, to a temporary service staffing service, still working with us in basically the same position, but he's still here on site with us.
Okay, so he'll be here with the special election.
Yes.
That's all I had.
Thank you, ma'am. Any additional questions? Hearing none, we'd move to old business.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I did have a question for the director under old business. And it'll be a very brief one. Yeah, Lynn, I was just wondering, are we, and it's going to be a two-part question. A, are we utilizing the drop boxes for the early? I don't recall, but the drop. I just wanted to know about the drop boxes.
Sure. Thank you.
Are we using? Yeah.
Thank you for that question. It's a good one. We're not authorized by law to use the drop boxes anymore. And until it's written into law, we won't be. Just a little history on that. When that was authorized, it was done so by the state election board as a remedy to an emergency situation with the pandemic. So it was only authorized for a certain amount of time. That time has now expired. Some version of being able to use the drop boxes has been written into several different pieces of legislation that have been submitted. Now, the ones that I have seen so far, they allow the drop boxes, but there are limitations on it. For instance, the latest version I saw, we couldn't put them outside. We could only put them at advanced voting centers and inside the building where advanced voting is going on. So they're writing it back in, but in a different format. It's never been in general law that we could use them at all. So I guess in a sense they are enacting our ability to use them, but and who knows what will happen. I've watched this legislation go through. Many election bills are out there, and they change once every couple of days. There are changes that are being made. One version I saw, kind of off subject a little bit, but it was some changes to advance voting, and it took away our optional ability to offer an additional Saturday, and it also eliminated Sunday voting. But then before you knew it, like within 2 or 3 days, Sunday voting was back in as an option, and so it's an ever-changing process with that legislation. So just stay tuned, and I'll try to keep you guys advised.
Thank you.
Oh,
Any additional questions or items to be considered under old business?
One, Mr. Chairman, a little update on the election officials conference that's coming up. So we know that the dates have been set for August the 29th through September the 1st. We know that the location is at Jekyll Island. At least that's, if we can meet in person, that's where it would be. There's been a lot of discussion about whether or not we are going to be able to meet in person, or if we can only have a limited number of people from each county, and exactly how that was going to work. The latest that we've heard is that this very important training will be held in person at Jekyll Island, and the number of attendees that will be able to go is based on the number of registered voters that you have in your county. And for counties of our size, 7 people will be allowed to attend. So that's the normal attendees of the 2 staff members and the 5 members of the board. I hope that all of you will be able to clear your calendar and be a part of that training, because it's going to be, they're making a big effort to really drill down into the nuts and bolts of the election process, and to spend some good quality time rather than hitting on 15 different new things and only covering things for 10 or 20 minutes. That they're going to focus and spend good quality training time on a lot of these issues. And I get the sense it's going to be excellent training. So I'll just keep you updated on that as information becomes available.
New business. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
second.
Second.
Then probably moved and seconded that we adjourn this March edition of the Board of Elections. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I didn't think we'd have any. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
We'll talk soon.
Hey, good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night. Aye.